Tom Brady was almost a member of the Miami Dolphins, and Patrick Mahomes was close to being a Washington Commander, but those are only a couple of the craziest NFL trades that almost happened. Starting with how these two Hall of Famers were almost traded for one another. In 2007, the Raiders were desperate for a quarterback, and while they did have the #1 overall pick in that year's draft, they decided to look elsewhere first to find their next QB, specifically Green Bay, who had a young Aaron Rodgers sitting on the bench waiting for his turn. And what was Oakland going to give up for Rodgers? Randy Moss. Yeah, the Hall of Fame wide receiver was on the trade block following his worst career year, and the Packers were willing to trade their future franchise QB to get him to win a Super Bowl now. If this trade happened, we would have seen Brett Favre and Randy Moss in Green Bay, and Aaron Rodgers with Calvin Johnson in Oakland, who they would have taken #1 overall after filling their QB need. But the trade never happened due to both teams not being able to agree on additional draft picks in the deal. So the Raiders traded Moss to the Patriots, while the Packers stuck with Rodgers, who became their starting quarterback the next year. That wasn't the only time the Raiders tried to get a big-name QB. The Silver and Black also tried to get Ben Roethlisberger in the early 2010s. The Steelers had some serious considerations about trading the best QB in franchise history after a slew of sexual assault and assault allegations came out against him. In 2010, with a suspension looming over for Roethlisberger, Pittsburgh was looking to deal him to a team with a top 10 pick, which included the Raiders, who had the 8th pick, and the Rams, who had the #1 overall pick. But the Steelers wound up holding on to Big Ben, who would go on to play his entire 18-year career in the Steel City. Meanwhile, the Rams and Raiders used their draft picks on Sam Bradford and Rolando McClain respectively, neither of whom played more than 4 years for those teams. But what if I were to tell you that Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson were all almost members of the Washington Commanders? Well, sort of. In 2022, Washington was really in need of a new QB. How needy were they? Well, according to one report, the Commanders called literally every team in the league to see if they could trade for their quarterback, which includes the likes of Mahomes, Jackson, and others. And I could only imagine just how quick those phone calls went. But the reason why this next trade didn't happen is one of the funniest in NFL history. In 2017, during their 0-16 campaign, the Browns were looking to get a new quarterback at the trade deadline. They had a deal in place with their division rivals Cincinnati Bengals, where backup QB AJ McCarron would go to Cleveland. But then this happened.
Browns were the ones who began talks with the Bengals saying, hey, we want to get AJ McCarron. That the Browns opened up conversations early in the day, let's say like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. By 3:15, I'm told that the Browns were not interested in the deal anymore. At 3:57, the Browns come along and say, all right, let's do it. 4 o'clock deadline. You need to get paperwork in, all right? And the paperwork is both teams send signed paperwork into the league. The league has to get it by 4 o'clock. The Bengals apparently did not sign the right paperwork or send it in. The Browns believe they did. The Browns thought they had completed a trade. The Bengals thought they had completed a trade. In the end, the league did not receive the proper paperwork. This could have happened at 1 o'clock. This could have happened at 2 o'clock. This could have happened at 3 o'clock, 3:15. The Browns waited until 3:57.
I got nothing. I got nothing.
Why?
I got nothing.
Why must the Browns brown so brown? Why can't you brown a little bit lighter?
Yeah, that actually happened. In 2022, we saw one of the biggest trades in NFL history when Russell Wilson was sent to the Denver Broncos for some huge compensation, which included multiple first-round picks and 3 players. But what if I were to tell you that Russ was incredibly close to being dealt to a different team? Despite drafting Justin Fields in 2021, the Bears were heavy in the running for the Russell Wilson sweepstakes, and their offer to the Seahawks was insane. Chicago was willing to part ways with 3 first-round picks, a 3rd-round pick, Akeem Hicks, Kyle Fuller, and Khalil Mack. It's unclear why Seattle decided not to go with this deal, but it ended up working well for both sides. The Seahawks got massive compensation from the Broncos for Wilson. Meanwhile, the Bears eventually ended up finding their franchise QB with Caleb Williams. This next trade fell through though because of the player complaining about it on social media. The AB fallout in Pittsburgh was incredibly messy. The Steelers traded the wide receiver in 2019 to the Raiders, where he was cut before playing a single game with the team. But a forgotten part about the saga was the original trade Pittsburgh had in place before Antonio Brown complained. AB was originally supposed to be dealt to the Bills, so much so that it was actually reported by Ian Rappaport that Brown was heading to Buffalo. However, AB was not a fan of the idea of playing for the Bills, even going as far as to comment on the official NFL Instagram post of his trade report, "Fake news." The following morning, the Bills backed out of the trade, but it still worked out for Buffalo because it allowed them to pursue Stephon Diggs the following offseason. And we have even seen some trades not happen because a player lied about being retired. In 2018, following their loss to the Eagles in the Super Bowl, the Patriots were trying to find suitors for their Hall of Fame tight end Rob Gronkowski, and it seemed like they had a deal in place until this happened.
Did have a career-altering trade, almost a career-altering trade. I actually traded to the Detroit Lions, and I called up and I got the phone call, and you just traded me to the Lions. I go, oh, I'm retired. Like, I don't know how that trade can go through. And then 2 days later, the trade never went through.
Yeah, to avoid getting traded to the Lions, Gronk faked being retired to stay on the Patriots, where he would end up winning a Super Bowl with them that season. But what if I were to tell you, we almost saw the GOAT get traded until the league found out that it was illegal. The Dolphins were trying hard to get Tom Brady in 2022 after he retired from the NFL originally. However, Brady still had a year left on his Bucs contract, and the Dolphins would have needed to trade for him if they wanted to get his services. The idea was to pair him up with Sean Payton, who had also recently stepped aside from the game. But since Brady was still under contract, and the team made direct contact with him about playing for Miami, which included hosting him on a yacht, the NFL struck down any potential trade due to tampering rules, and they even took away a couple of Dolphins draft picks for violating them. Brady did unretire, but played his final year with the Bucs, and the Saints did wind up trading Sean Payton in 2023, but to the Denver Broncos. And since Miami went about their business illegally, they lost out on both of them.